The only philosophy I went by was give it a red hot crack, try to be the best you can at the job you're doing, try to find what you think is the best job in the best industry, in the best company, and then just give it a red hot crack, and if it doesn't work out, move on, and just keep whittling down the things you don't like. And so I think by that series of deductions, I guess, I eventually sort of narrowed it down to the type of the industry and the environment, the pace, the people I want to be surrounded by, and just eventually got to where I'm really, really happy in the last few years.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Rohit Bhargava, and you are listening to episode 203 of the Startup Playbook podcast, a weekly series where I sit down with successful tech founders, investors, and operators to unpack their journey, lessons, and insights to help current and future entrepreneurs. The voice that you heard a little bit earlier was that of our guest for this episode, the co-founder and CEO of Zeller, Ben Pfisterer. This is Ben's third time on this podcast, and I last had him on the show in August 2020 when he'd come out of stealth to announce his new company Zeller and their $6.3 million funding round. Over the last 4 years, it's been an absolutely incredible journey for Ben and for Zeller, having gone on to become Australia's fastest company to $1 billion valuation, reaching that milestone in just under 2 years. They've now got 85,000 customers, 260 staff, and have raised $180 million in funding. In this episode, we covered a wide range of topics, including the challenges that come with scale, how raising capital changes from seed to Series B stage, how hiring and company culture evolves as you scale the company, why Ben does not do any one-on-ones with any of his direct reports, and much more. Without further ado, here is my interview with Ben Pfisterer. Ben, welcome back to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Thank you, and thanks for having me back.
Of course, third time.
Yes. Time's gone fast.
Time's gone very fast. We were just talking before we turned on the mic. I think the last time we did an interview together was August 2020.
Well, yep.
Which is a long time ago. Feels like just yesterday.
Does not seem like 4 years, but a lot's happened for both of us. So.
Yes, absolutely. So, Ben, for those people that may not be as familiar with you and your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, I've been in payments industry for a very long time. Probably too long than I probably should. But I guess probably the last two things probably define what I'm doing at the moment, but I set up Square in Australia, so I was the first employee. Set the brand up here, went through the rigmarole, all the challenging times at the start, got that scaled in about 6 years there, and then left to set up a company called Zeller, which with my three other co-founders. And Zeller's about redefining what business banking should be, along with next generation payment solutions. So rather than having to cobble together all your different fintech solutions and banking solutions and not quite service your need, have it all in one system, one ecosystem that actually serves your needs better as a business. And so, yeah, we've been doing that for 3.5, 4 years we've been live now. And yeah, about 85,000 customers, still growing pretty fast, which is good, but enjoying the journey.
Yeah, amazing. Obviously, so many parts of the story that we're going to dive into, but it's interesting, even though we've done this interview twice, I feel like there's still so much that I learn about each of the guests coming both into the interview and from the interview itself. I learned that your dad was in payments as well.
Kind of just by a little bit. He did a lot of consulting he had his own company, electrical engineering company, and he basically built this switch for NAB, so National Australia Bank. He didn't work at NAB, but he was a sort of consultant. Basically this mainframe switch which connected, I believe, all their branch tellers. So he kind of was the only person that knew how to do it, and so there's one man show kind of thing, and built it, and then the bank became 100% reliant on it. And he did a very good job of it. So it was in place for many, many years. So I didn't actually join the dots that we were both technically in the same sort of industry for some time, but he did technically have a background there. So yeah.
Yeah. Did any of his experience around that sort of shape how you sort of think about maybe not even just payments, but just business overall?
Yeah, I think probably more subconsciously than anything. At the time when you're a kid, you're a bit rude when you're a kid. You don't really care too much about what your parents' backstory is. You kind of know the details, but you don't think too much about it. But sort of looking back on it, I think I passively absorbed that ability or that knowledge that he was an entrepreneur the whole time, and you didn't have to follow a traditional path to do what you want, and make sure you're doing something you love, and you can build your own business. So I think I passively did that, and both my siblings own their own business, so we must have absorbed that. Whether it was a gene or whether it was a learning over the time, we definitely knew that was a path you could take. So
yeah, amazing. What were there any other lessons that you've absorbed during that time that's kind of helped you manage the journey of, again, not just with Zeller, but even with some of the other things that you've done with your career?
Seeing what my dad did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he went through difficulty when I used to work at Siemens and HP and that. And when he came out to Australia, he had a very thick German accent. And the German migrants or the European migrants coming out at the time were obviously the most prevalent. And sort of he went through a lot of difficulty in that because he had this really odd accent, which didn't sit well with the Australian spirit at the time. So he suffered a fair bit of, I don't know if it's such thing as passive racism or just direct racism, but sort of a lot of teasing or what have you. So, and I think he just stood up for himself and left and did his own thing. And whilst obviously we've been lucky to live in a very multicultural society now, I kind of learnt that, if you're not happy with what you're doing and you're not being treated well, follow your dreams, don't put up with it, don't go quiet. I think that probably that backbone part of what he did at the time was certainly, it's been strong in us, all of the kids. So.
And obviously, when we last spoke 4 years ago, you were at the sort of very early stages of Zeller, and it was your kind of first company, and kind of something that's sort of coming up through this is, that seems to be part of your sort of family history a little bit.
Yep.
Was that always, I guess, something that you knew you were going to do and were sort of waiting for the right time and opportunity, or did that sort of more organically grow and build over time as the concept of Zeller came about? I'm just curious about what that sort of looked like for you growing up.
Yeah, I think, no, because when I grew up, I sort of went to a competitive school in Melbourne High and, fell into the trap of thinking big corporates, big brands and competitive careers was the way forward. So I was a very slow learner. It took a while to realise that wasn't the path for me at all. But I kind of knew quickly because I wouldn't last at these jobs too long and I kept moving around. And I just eventually realised that I just liked doing really hard stuff. I was a bit... we all probably get to this point, or entrepreneurs do anyways, where you're an impatient personality in general, and so you don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I found that's when I went dormant. That's when I got frustrated, and that's probably my best version of myself wasn't on display at work because I just wanted to do different stuff. I wanted to, grow the departments or the products that I was working in. So, yeah, I guess that kind of came through. I didn't realise there was paths like this, and obviously tech. The risk of sounding too old, tech back then wasn't tech. It wasn't consumer facing, business facing. It was very behind the scenes infrastructure play. So when those opportunities emerged, that's when I sort of really gelled and liked it and sort of jumped into it. And mainly through the innovation of payments, loved that difficulty of it, the ever changing nature of it, and the fact that it's, for me, commerce is everywhere. It is everywhere. We're buyers, sellers, everything. So just that weird interaction that we all have, I kind of got hooked on. So yeah, but no. Doing hard stuff, starting a business, that was all sort of natural to me. So, yeah.
Yeah. And, I guess sometimes it's hard for people to connect the dots in the moment of just kind of going, is there something wrong with me? Versus, is there something wrong with like the environment that I'm spending time in? For people that are maybe sort of stuck in that and aren't quite sure about how to approach that or how to find their thing, do you have any advice in how they might sort of think about doing that or things that they might be able to try?
Yeah, you're right. Because when we talk about it, and I'm sure you have a similar, we've talked about your career as well, is like when you look back on, there's a thread, there's a logic, there's a path, but that's like a simple narrative that you build retrospectively. It's not always clear when you're doing it at all. And I had no idea. Be co-founding effectively a new business bank and payments and business. So no, I had no idea at the time. But the only philosophy I went by was like, give it a red hot crack, try to be the best you can at the job you're doing, try to find what you think is the best job in the best industry, in the best company, and then just give it a red hot crack. And if it doesn't work out, move on and just keep whittling down the things you don't like. And so I think by that sort of series of deductions, I guess, I eventually sort of narrowed it down to the type of the industry and the environment, the pace, the people I want to be surrounded by, and just eventually got to where I'm really, really happy in the last few years. So yeah, just a series of trying stuff constantly. And I think some people are luckier and find where they like to sit early, but I took a while. But I'm glad I didn't sort of settle and just stick in the same thing because it was never going to work out for me that way. So.
And for our listeners that haven't gone back and sort of listened to the last interview that we did together, what was the origination of the idea for Zeller? Where did that sort of come from, and what did that look like in pursuing that from a starting point?
Yeah, there was a lot of things happening at the time. So after obviously building Square up for 6 years, and it was a very, very difficult journey, and but I was completely hooked. I loved the fact that we were, growing the brand fast, and I learned how to build a brand from scratch in a new market and scale it and build a team together and take on incumbents, etc. So when looking or trying to decide what to do next after I left Zeller, it was clear I was going to stay in my own lane. I did a lot of application development, prototyping to try different things, but just kept coming back to just that one thing that no one was actually taking on the big banks in the business banking space. And, there's a good reason for that because it's very, very hard and they're very established and they're very entrenched in the psyche and the economy. So, but you look around the world, very few new startup fintechs or anything ever really take on the incumbents at that degree. They often take a niche or a wedge and do very well there, whether it's, lending, corporate cards, expense management, debit, loyalty, whatever. They take that on and build their own position, but no one was jumping in the middle to take on these big banks. And that just seemed like the ultimate challenge, which I think in Australia desperately needs that competition in that middle. So I thought if I want to do something hard, there's nothing harder. So let's give it a crack. And I was just lucky to have some good people around me.
Yeah. And I guess when we sort of initially spoke, at that time, I think you'd just come out of stealth. You'd raised your seed round, which I believe was 6.3 million, led by SquarePeg Capital. And I think you had a team of about 20 odd.
The first round, no, there's only 4 of us. So
there were
that
only
was
4 of you.
10 days into our getting together. So it was a whirlwind start of 2020. It was just crazy. So yeah, we literally hadn't written a line of code or a document or didn't have a name, anything.
I heard you raised when you didn't have a name or anything involved as well.
Yeah, we literally didn't have anything. We had, what we did have, I'm very, very clear of what objective of what we wanted to do, how we'd do it, why we'd be good at it, how we're going to approach it. But there was infinite unknowns and we hadn't actually started anything. So yeah, it was extremely early, but when you're building something that big, you kind of have to follow that, really aggressive path of raising a lot of capital and, taking on bold bets. So,
yeah. Speaking of, raising capital, obviously, everyone talks about the storytelling aspect of raising capital. Again, listening back to our interview, I think you weren't intending to raise the initial conversations that you sort of had with SquarePeg at that time.
Yep.
And even for SquarePeg, I think it was the first time that they'd sort of invested in a company pre-product, pre-revenue, or at that particular stage. And obviously you've gone on to raise, I think it's 180 mil since then, fastest to a unicorn valuation within 2 years. What has that story evolved for you over time? So the story that you kind of had at that sort of pre-seed stage of what it is that you were sort of building to what it looks like now. What are the differences when you're sort of raising 100 mil for your Series B compared to the story that you tell at that sort of pre-seed stage?
Yeah, I do believe storytelling in a positive light is a massively important thing. I mean, you could swap that term out with communication in general, right? So if you can't convey what you're trying to do, why you're doing it succinctly and make sure it's very clear and ticks all the boxes of what investors are looking for, you're obviously never going to get past that stage. So, and that is wrapped up in the word that is storytelling. But yeah, there's definitely a degree of that. And I definitely talked about, my background, team's background, what we've been through, the difficulty we'd done in former jobs and the task at hand, why we were the right people. And you have to wrap that up into a narrative which is digestible and appealing as well. So we're a very bit of a binary company. We were very sort of straightforward. So I wasn't like talking about TAMs or taking over the world or this long-term vision. It was literally, here is the challenge at hand we want to do. This is why we're going to do it. This is why we're the best people to do it. And this is why you should get involved. So, but yeah, absolutely. The investment thing is human to human. It's like it's like this trust that has to be built really quickly. And I think when you build trust really quickly with a potential investor and then the conversation becomes more organic, but if you go off on tangents or you lose people early, obviously it's never going to work. So no, storytelling is very, very important. And actually didn't change too much through the rounds. Obviously the more work we did, we injected that into it. The more learnings we had, we injected that into it. And then obviously the latter rounds, we're actually growing really fast. So that was included in the story as well. But yeah, the underscore was very similar.
I think the like you said, you're kind of selling to people, and the large part of that is the relationship that you're building with the investors.
Yep.
And so, I think to your point, I guess the pre-seed stage where you don't have a lot of data around the business or what you can do when you're selling them and what you will do.
No data.
No data. Yeah. You're often kind of leaning on the history of the team and what you've done previously versus when you're sort of later in the company, it's more about your kind of execution over time and sort of delivering on what you said you would do as well. So part of that storytelling piece is, I think it's a kind of striking that balance of how do you get people excited, but not put a rod against your back around things that are unachievable for you as a business, because it's not just about raising that round. It's about being able to set your business up for long-term success.
Yeah. I mean, it's a balance, right? Because, I think because we've been in the industry for a while and through the Square experience, learned a lot about building a new business and scaling and some of the difficulties and how to do growth and how to do brand building and team building. So I think that stuff was, coming from a, direct hymnship of being accurate. So I knew how to do that. So it wasn't going on a limb there, but in terms of and I think we were a very analytical team where we could actually project if things went right, this is what it would look like. So that wasn't too much. But again, you then have to go and build it. And then you have to, design it, build it, test it, launch it, scale it, support it, evolve it. And there's like a myriad things that have to be done to actually realize those goals. So But you're right. No, definitely not overselling. Like if you think something can't be done, but you like the fake it till you make it stuff, I just don't believe in. I believe in being bold and saying this is the challenge, this is where we might fall over, this is where we need to do, but just own that as well. And I think investors gravitate towards that when you're believable and you're being realistic and truthful as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Something else that we spoke about, well, one thing that you sort of mentioned at the start was the challenges of kind of taking on the big banks and everything that kind of comes with it. I'm curious in terms of what were some of the unexpected parts of the challenge. So I think this is by nature, anyone who started a company before underestimates how easy or how difficult things will be through the period. What are some of the sort of unexpected challenges of kind of building and scaling Zeller or kind of competing in this market that you weren't expecting at the start that have come up?
Yeah, it's a tricky question to answer that one because I have, I think, an inbuilt safety mechanism that makes me eradicate all knowledge of things that went wrong immediately to maintain the faith of moving forward. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you get stuck in the past or what goes wrong, you won't be able to move forward and you can get paralyzed by it. So there is a little bit of that and I block it out, but pushing myself through that, the general boring answer is absolutely everything. It, to some degree, kind of goes wrong or not as you expect it. Probably, we were very lucky when we launched. We were growing very quickly. I think, COVID for us was the best thing that ever happened to our business because we literally were locked in our homes for a year as we all were. And we built this business at a pace which wouldn't have been possible in the normal non-COVID world. So we were very lucky there. And when we launched, we were just so hungry and so, just absolutely determined to make it work at that point. And I think we did a phenomenal job as a whole collective team to build the products that we had ready to go. They were stable, they were reliable, they were off good cost base. We had a good strategy in place. We had a great team. So a lot of the things were in the right place. So we kind of didn't struggle there. I think just when you keep scaling and go through the phases, you can kind of predict what's going to happen in the first phase. And then constantly every day is a new challenge. Everything different happens. I think the people side, the culture side, to one degree, it's quite easy because if you're trying to be true to yourself, and this is the company we are, but when you get up to, I think we're 260 people now, it's harder then to sort of balance a team because you can't create a company that's perfect for 260 people. That's just not impossible. Everyone wants different things from life and career, etc. There's challenges in that. The fact that competitors don't sit still. And I love that. It keeps us honest, keeps us moving. And we're a product company, so we keep moving all the time. We never stop. We never build something and sit on it. But when you look at it, it's awesome. We got these big, well-capitalized competitors who just keep going and keep coming back at us. And I love that. Obviously, we sit in a very regulated industry, so there's challenges that come with that. Although that's been relatively good because I've faced a lot of challenges over my career in the regulatory space. So probably not as bad as it has been, but it's still very, very challenging on that front. And just this sounds like a ridiculously stupid answer, but the challenge that comes with scale. So when you scale fast, it's a blessing, right? You're absolutely thrilled and it's awesome, but maintaining that, like you can't just sit back and do the same thing. Otherwise it will decline or stagnate. So constantly looking ahead of the good times and being in that mode, all right, it's good now, but what next? Let's plan for the next thing. Let's get the new products thought about. Let's start building them, even when you don't feel like doing them yet. How are we going to build that new scale, increase the market size, increase that? All that stuff's hard. And just getting the brand out there as well. Just making sure that it's a very entrenched industry, the banking industry in Australia. So to even get your brand seen, heard, talked about, virality starting, that's a whole challenge in itself as well. So.
Yeah. I know that you maybe meant this a little bit as a joke, but I think what you said about a skill set of being able to sort of let go of things that have gone wrong is actually really important. I was having a chat with one of our portfolio companies for Playbook Ventures, and they were telling me that like one of the values that they had is no fuck ups through this.
Right.
And they were just like, oh, like this third party got sick and weren't able to come in, and so that kind of messed up the KPI. I'm like, that's so out of your control, and everything goes wrong at the startup. Like that is a terrible target to have.
If you can pull it off though, that'd be pretty good. But no, it's unlikely.
Yeah, it's unlikely. And so, flip it around to like how many 5-star reviews will you get around the product instead? So kind of make it more built around the customer delight versus things that are like way out of your control that are bringing down company morale and all of those sort of things around it. But, as you said, everything goes wrong from a startup perspective, and it can be really difficult and challenging, especially from a founder perspective, to maintain that excitement, buzz, keep that going, not just for yourself, but also for your team as well. is there any, it sounds like it might be a innate ability, but is there anything that you kind of do to help you manage that for yourself, or build that, like, is that something that you've kind of built up over time?
Yeah, I probably learned a lot through the Square experience, because I sort of hinted at it was very, very difficult in the early times, and a lot went wrong, and there was no guarantee we'd be able to launch it. So I learned a lot about, basically getting told, no, this is not going to launch, we're not going to improve this device, to then walk out into a room of a small team who were just, working ridiculous hours to get this thing off the ground. And how do you balance, hey, there's some bad news and some good news? And so you have to, I don't have any good news, so you go, all right, I got to get it. And then you got to build it up and, show a path forward. And I think I learned a lot through that, and the resiliency of how to motivate people, but also be direct and transparent as well, and just tell them take them for the journey. And I think you get more buy-in if you do from the really good people. They love that as well. They want to be involved with the details and move forward. But yeah, I think it's probably something I'm still learning. But I think when you go through different phases, what worked in a small team versus a medium versus large, and obviously one day enterprise, is going to be very, very different. And you have to hope that the values and the behaviors you entrenched in the team around you sort of propagate to everyone else. But no, you see that with every scaling business, is where it becomes unstuck, is that doesn't scale very well. So it is constant learning, constant.
Yeah. And in terms of that transparency as well, like it's again something that I've grappled with when I've run companies, and people that I've spoken to on the podcast as well, is you want to be transparent, but how do you also balance that with protecting and shielding the team from knowing everything as well? How do you sort of think about that from your perspective?
I just think, every company and every CEO says we believe in transparency, but I think if you're going to believe in transparency, you've got to believe in the fact that people aren't going to like what you say. Like you can't be transparent and have people love everything you say. Those things don't go together. You're either you take out the bad bits and you're a people pleaser and you pretend to be transparent and you get the good vibes back and the good responses. But transparency means warts and all. It means good and bad. So inherently, not everyone's going to like. So if you're going to be transparent, get ready to get it back a bit, and you have to withstand that. And I think the people that really gel in that high growth startup environment, they're okay with that. And they understand that transparency means good and bad. But yeah, every CEO that says that, I assume, would also say it's really hard. It's really hard to do it. But you got to stick to your guns. And some people aren't going to like what you say. But I think everyone ultimately says, well, they are being transparent if they're doing that. But it's just difficult.
We're going to take a very quick break from this podcast to talk about one of our partners, Vanta. So if you're building a SaaS business and want to quickly unlock growth and build customer trust, one way to do this is by achieving compliance with SOC 2, ISO 27001, CPS 234, Essential 8, or other in-demand compliance frameworks. However, this process is often time-intensive and very costly. Vanta automates up to 90% of compliance, making you audit-ready quickly and saving you up to 85% of associated costs. And not only that, Vanta scales with your business. With a market-leading trust management platform to help you continuously monitor compliance, unify risk management, and streamline security reviews. You can join over 8,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, and Indebted that use Vanta to build trust and prove security in real time. As a listener of the show, you can get up to $1,000 US off Vanta when you head over to vanta.com/demo. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah. And you sort of obviously sort of touched on COVID, and was the period that you sort of built on, which was really helpful and impactful for you from a business perspective, and really being able to focus on the product and get things out there. Obviously from a fundraising perspective as well, things worked out really well. But, I also, listening back to that interview where, I remember us kind of speaking about the challenges that sort of come from maintaining that or building that culture from a company perspective, especially at the start, at the ground up. I think you had mentioned that there were still some early team members that you hadn't met face to face yet, months in. Yeah. And obviously we're now on the sort of other side of that, but I'm curious about the period that you sort of built the company in through COVID and through lockdown and everyone being remote. What are sort of some of the positive and negative impacts that might have had on sort of company culture into what Zeller is today?
Yeah, I think it's probably changed dramatically in varying degrees. I mean, then I think it's quite easy when you've got a small team and you're all sort of very much joined at the hip and you're relying on each other. There's less ambiguity because every message you say to everyone. We used to have full team meetings up to about 40 or 50 people, which was crazy. But and that communication part of it, that bring people along was better. And as you scale, it sort of gets more dispersed, and that becomes different. So I think your culture has to evolve, and you probably lose some people along the way because they like the earlier stage, or some people come in and they like the later stage, or they're waiting for the next stage. So I think being okay with that, being okay that you can't be that perfect company to every type of employee is also okay, and just move with the change. Like I look around at the team that we've got now, I love the balance. I love the people we've got, and I think they're amazing and very talented and the right team that we need now. But then now and again you sort of stop and you blink and you think back, and then there was that other, obviously a lot of common people, but there was all these people that are no longer with us from a company perspective, very much alive. But yeah, you just you look back and you go, it's kind of a whole new phase and it's moved on. But that's part of life. Like I've changed careers, I've changed jobs, people do that. And so it's okay. I definitely sort of constantly going back to that well and sort of saying, you've got to keep going, we're going. Because the problem with a high growth tech startup, there's no end. There's no like, okay, if we get to there, we're done. We've got there, we can just stop. It's like, it's constant, and arguably it gets harder, and arguably it gets more difficult, and the message has to change, etc. So yes, some people can't handle that, and they can't handle the constantly going back to the well and constantly pushing forward, and other people love it. Like that's what drives them forward. That's why they come to work at a place like Zeller, is like constantly being challenged and constantly going on, never settling with what they've got. So for me, I love that. I love that we're never getting to that end state. I think that's an exciting part of it. But you can enjoy it, the milestones along the way too. Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned in that interview that stuck with me ever since then was, hiring people that are inherently motivated. Because you said, part of your role as CEO is to motivate your team. But if they already come motivated, you don't have to focus your energy on doing that. You can focus out on more sort of impactful things for the business.
Yep.
I imagine, there are particular values and qualities that are really important that haven't changed since the very early employees of Zeller to what you look for now. But are there other things that have changed in terms of skills or kind of the approach that you take to hiring that is different now than what it was when you first started?
Yeah, I think when you're starting, it's very clear about what sort of company you are in terms of you're telling these new starters either a version of, we have nothing yet. We haven't built it. We're going to build it. We're just starting. There's no guarantees. And that's very clear. So the people that joined then, they knew that. That wasn't a question. I think when you get bigger and keep scaling, it's a different conversation. So they're no longer joining with that sort of ambiguity. They actually want to know what's the past, what's the future, how am I going to fit into it. So that part of it definitely changes, and conveying that during it. But the one thing that I've probably lent more and more into, and it's probably at the risk of sounding really negative, is just being really, really upfront with the fact that what we're doing is hard, and there is no amazing, successful, or any company with any longevity that hasn't done it via hard work. And I just feel in the LinkedInification of our industries these days is like there seems to be this, you're on one side or the other. Like, do you believe in hard work, or do you believe in life and life outside of work? And the problem is that we've all got that balance. Like we've all got our life outside work. I love my life outside of work, but I love my life at work, but we have to work hard. So it's just being upfront. So I'm very, very heavy on that. It's the point where I might scare some people off. So I just want to be really clear. Like, people at Zeller work hard. They work really hard, but the things they want to, and they enjoy it, and they love being motivated by this new talent that comes on board and say, wow, how good is this person? This is incredible. Now I can get better. And they love that. If you don't like that, and if you're like, hey, this is just facilitating my life, my career is not everything to me, or it's not, it should never be everything, but it's less important than it should be in a company like ours. We're not that company. Like we're not just here to provide a paycheck and then go out and enjoy the rest of your life. It's like, let's find, I don't like the term work-life balance, but let's find a balance. And I believe personally, I've been able to find it. I love my kids, my family, my friends, my hobbies. I love that outside of work, but I love going to work. And when I'm at work, I work hard. And if everyone does that, we all find our balance together. But I think when you start building a brand in the industry, like we're not massive by any stretch, but people start knowing the company they're coming to, some come to Zeller for the wrong reasons. Like, I want to go work at a high growth tech startup, or this company that I see at this bar or restaurant or wherever. Yeah, that's not a reason to come to a company. You got to come because you like what we're doing and you gel with our culture there, and you want to be part of that hard work culture. So yeah, being upfront like that, I think, and I hear myself say it in the interviews, I think, wow, I'm literally scaring this person off. But I think that helps find the people that really want to be there.
Yeah, I had Mark Woodland from Kismet on the podcast. I don't know if you've met Mark previously, but amazing founder. And, one of the things that he mentioned is he's the last stage of the interview and his job is to literally try and scare people away because, he just said, because it's not just about convincing someone to join. It's like you really want them to opt into your company, and really talented people have the benefit of options on the table. And so you much rather them know with open eyes in terms of what they're getting themselves into and choosing to be there, because it'll be the best outcome for both you and for them. And if it's not the right thing, it's better to make that call then than it is to try and convince someone to join and then, a couple of months in, they're like, oh, this isn't really for me, or,
no,
things don't really work.
It's absolutely spot on. And I think the other challenge is that as much as you say hard work, is that people have different interpretations of what that means. Like they may have never actually experienced the true definition of hard work and how to 100% own your work and be responsible for it and be proud of it and take feedback and push forward. And so, that's a big part of the interview process. I think it's important for everyone to do that. So, and you should never oversell a company or a culture to an employee, because if it's not what it is, I think that backfires badly. Yeah.
What does that interview process then look like, and how do you test for those particular traits? Because they're relatively easy to talk about, but harder to gauge during the interview process, I imagine.
Ridiculously hard to interview for, but I find it probably gets a little bit uncomfortable for some people, so I don't push it. But the more you can get into a really natural conversation about, and I don't want to reveal personal stuff if they don't want to, but the more we're getting into off-script interview questions and we're starting to talk about things and examples and asking them for contrarian views on stuff and saying, hey, don't, if they say, I won't get to that. But just having those more deep conversations about different topics, and I think they're the way better ones. Like I'll rarely say, okay, tell me a time when you succeeded and failed, and how do you grow this, and how do you do that. Like I'll say a few job related questions, and then it's just trying to find that little thread that builds trust between the interviewer and interviewee, and then they feel comfortable to actually start talking about honestly what they're looking for in a job. Because everyone goes into an interview saying, oh, I must say this or I must say that or project this or project that. And it's like, that's not helpful in an interview. Just be who you are. And if it's the right company, we'll gel together and it'll go really well and you'll be working at Zeller. But, if we work out that actually we're not the right place for you, and it's not that you're a bad employee, you're very talented, but we just might be the right place. And the quicker you can get to that personal conversation, the better. So,
do you have an example? I know that you said you didn't want to really open up on that, but do you have an example of the type of question or like how you'd sort of approach that from an interview?
That question spring to mind. I think probably the starting point, and it won't sound very revolutionary at all, this is an easy one, but I try to find a job or a role they hated, because we all hate certain jobs and roles. We leave companies for reasons. Like you'd stay at the same company for life if you loved everything, right? You eventually don't like something, whether it's the politics, the bureaucracy, the company, the culture, whatever. And it takes a little while to get to that. So I just tease away until they finally admit, yes, I left that company because of this happened. And then if they're willing to be a bit more transparent, they start opening up about what happened, and I think then you can get to know the person a little bit more about what that happened. And often it's the best choice they could have made, but the more you can just sort of pick away at that if they feel comfortable, and then they talk about it, and then you can really follow that thread. Okay, so you didn't like, I don't know, micromanagement or something. Let's talk about that. How do you manage people? How would you want to be managed? And you can follow that thread to work out, okay, is this actually the same as the environment we provide, or is that something different? So yeah, just finding that thread and going with it, and more than anything. But the question about when you failed is a really hard one, because when you ask me that, I struggle with it. But I think if you can have a question that somehow gets in there, and what do you look back on your career with regret? Like what was something that if you did it now you could do better, and then they get into that, and then you just go deep on it. You got to really understand as much as possible, and then translate it through how they evolved over time and what they try to avoid, that type of thing. So yeah, no perfect example, but in much like a podcast interview, I hope, where I don't go into an interview, I have a few questions I might ask, but I just want to be open and take it where it goes, and they're the best ones. And then you kind of forget you're in an interview with the best people when you then suddenly click at the end and go, yes, you're definitely coming to work for us, please.
Yeah.
Because you went off script and you were enjoying it, and it was an organic conversation. It went places both of you didn't expect it to go. They're the best ones. So.
Yeah. And I think when you kind of remove that, because everyone comes, or most people come prepared, very prepared for an interview. I think when you remove what they're expecting, you kind of get to who they really are as a person and what they really think in the moment.
Yep.
I think you just find out a lot more about them, and if you gel, it's much more with that authentic version than the scripted pitched version.
It was kind of before here, like, and truth be told, I did say, hey, was there questions before this? I should take a look, because before whenever I do podcasts, and particularly with you, I never look at the questions, and we never talk about the questions apart from broad topics sort of thing. And so I think if you read them, you try to regurgitate them, and they never come across as genuine in a podcast or a job interview or a media interview. But if you just get hit with them on the spot, the more truthful answer comes out. So I think that's a better way to do it.
Yeah, which is also why I generally never share questions ahead of time.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
I literally had someone who came, this is very early into the podcast, came with a written down like answers to the first few questions, and he just started reading them out, and I was like, oh no, like I'm never doing this. I'm never doing this again.
That's when you just start asking weird questions. And like, hang on a minute, what was that?
Yeah. So one thing that I remember you kind of mentioning in the first interview was how you got deeply involved. Like you were the very first interview with everyone that came on. Obviously now with 260 people, I imagine that isn't the same. But again, you have very clear things that you're looking for during the interview process and things that are important for you, and as a result, Zeller as a company.
Yeah.
How do you sort of translate what is important to you when you're not as involved in the hiring process to the rest of the company, and how do you sort of set up the interview process in that way?
Yeah, I've actually got more back involved now because I again, when you go through a scaling company, when you look back, you see, oh, there was that phase, and that phase. But when you're in those phases or transgressing those phases, you don't know that's happening at the time. So, and one of the most common ones all founders would say is like, we kind of blinked and then suddenly the culture had changed, or the type of person working there was different, and I should have got more involved, and I had to get more involved. And correcting that once people are employed there is impossible. It's very, very hard to do. So I kind of stepped back a fair bit, and now I've stepped back in again. Not all interviews, definitely not, but more sort of critical ones or areas I think we need to tighten up, or teams we need a little bit of a shot in the arm with. So, and people like that. Like they actually like it, and they think it's good that we're bringing a CEO or COO or someone else more senior into an interview. That's I mean, if I was getting interviewed, I'd be like, that clearly this role is important. So I think it works well for both of them. So I do get more involved. Apart from that, I've been very lucky to work with the team who's been with us from the start, the senior executive team, and we talk every week about the highs and the lows and things working and not working. So I have no doubt that if I spoke to anyone in my team, they would talk exactly the same about what type of person we need in a company, and the culture that we are, or the expectations we have, or the things we're not as well. So I think it's very, very clear. Whether everyone can interview that well is probably not the case. I think it's a little bit more of a natural thing. A lot of people aren't comfortable going off piste and just asking questions. People like, so I don't expect them to do that, but as a company at scale, I think we're all learning. I think every manager learns nonstop about the type of person they want working in their teams, and sometimes certain people add to a positive culture. Sometimes you need to inject someone in to actually disrupt the culture there and course correct it. So the type of hiring and the type of person you bring in can change dramatically as well. But I think generally we do a good job, but we're still learning.
What does that, like, I'm curious. Obviously, when you've got a team of, let's say, 20 people and 20 to 40 people, you're still deeply involved. You still have a touch point to pretty much everyone in the company. It's a little bit different when you have a team of 260. And I imagine you've got different teams and structures, and you've got managers that are hiring for their own teams and may have their own particular views on what they want their team or the value of that team to be. That may or may not always be exactly what you, from a Zeller perspective, sort of look for. How do you think about that, or how does that play out for you when you're scaling a company as quickly as you are? I
think every team has a degree of autonomy, what type of team they want, but there is, I can't make up numbers, 80, 90% has to be exactly what we want as a company. You can't go and build your own team and culture within a broader environment, otherwise that might clash with other teams and it might gel as well as it could. And in a company like ours, every team works together. Like the success of our business is the way we work together as different teams. So it's just communication. Like I don't have one-on-ones with my senior team at all, unless that's a personal thing they want to talk about. But every week we have 3, we've scaled back to 2 now, but 3, all my senior teams in the same room. So I think there's many benefits of that, but so every person in that room learns every week, every day about other teams, what's good and bad with them. But when someone doesn't work out in a particular team and that lead is sharing that, everyone's learning at the same time. And we reflect on what do we do wrong? Is that really right? And we thought that type of person is what we wanted, but it turns out it didn't. The sharing of information among people, like if someone, like a positive thing, like that new hire you got in product, she's amazing. She's going so well. And then everyone can chime in and say, yeah, we're such a good hire, and she's successful because of this or that, and people can learn from it from others as well. But just again, communication, open. I think everyone sort of absorbs it in their own way. But you do have to have aligned teams. They have to be relatively similar in culture.
Again, I'm going to keep referencing the interview that we did 4 years ago, but one of the things that you mentioned was intentionally building multiple products versus just kind of focusing on one product. And I think, again, one of the things that we spoke about was, there are playbooks or kind of suggested ways of doing things, but you really have to build the type of company that you want. So I guess specifically from a product perspective, what does that look like both from the start to what it is like now? And again, how do you sort of retain that focus on building the company that you want to build as things get bigger and scale and there's more opportunities and things that sort of come up? How do you sort of retain that focus for yourself?
Yeah, the number one lesson, it's not the number one, but it's one of that I've learned over the years is that general advice is absolutely rubbish. Like it's absolute rubbish. And because the companies are so different, the people are so different, your objectives, your speed, your scale, the personalities, your investments, your capital, everything is so different. To take advice from someone that's done it in their myriad different facets of their business to say, I'm going to apply that, just doesn't work. It doesn't work. So probably a couple of books there that would say things that I have not done. I've done the opposite of, and that's right. It should be that way because it works for some and not others. So the decision that I made early on was I wanted to be a product-rich company, and I wanted to build a lot. And it was because I love product. I love building. I love the process of it. I love the industry needs it and needs more products, and the nature of our ecosystem means we need lots of products to make it actually work. So a little bit selfish from the product perspective, but that's what the ultimate solution success will rely on. So the fact that we did that early was the best thing ever. Now, that was my thesis, and I was pushing it hard. We're going to build as much as we can. What I didn't realize is actually how right that was for us in terms of every business person that scaled a business to a reasonable scale gets stuck in this problem further down the track, where once you've been around for a few years and got a certain amount of products or a certain amount of scale, you've now got the competing priorities of future bold bet projects you need to do, maintenance you have to do, fixes you need to do, probably regulatory or risk things you need to clean up. You got customers coming at you saying, I need this and that and this feature and this request. So the types of priorities you get are so convoluted. So that prioritization is almost impossible. But what always happens is where businesses fail often is that those bold bets, those things that will let them thrive in the future, are the first ones they cut back. So the good thing about us is we did a lot of them early. So we did the hardest things early. We did a lot of things early. So when we got to this point, if we'd done one product and now trying to build the additional 12 we've got, I don't think that'd get done. But you do it when everyone's ridiculously hungry, we're lean, we're moving fast, we're not juggling these different layers of priorities. And so getting them done early is a big thing. I'm assuming we'll come across more and more challenges as we move forward of those myriad different layers of prioritization. We already feel it now in prioritization exercises, but don't follow my advice on this. But the more you can do early, the better. And if you can maintain that culture or that philosophy of constant iteration, constant building, let's get on to the next thing, let's keep going. If you can do that from the start and keep it going, it's so valuable to business, because trying to create that later is impossible. You can't just go, hey, we've been steady for 4 years, product's been doing really well, we didn't actually do much on it apart from maintain it, now let's do something totally different. Those people will not be the people you need to do that. So yeah, keeping that consistent throughout the journey has really served us well.
Someone I spoke to as part of the research process for this interview, which was Josh, who worked with you. I think you guys first crossed paths about 11 years ago.
Scaringly, yes.
Yeah.
Josh McNichol, yes.
Yeah, worked with you at Square and now at Zeller.
Yep.
And one of the things that he mentioned about your superpower was just you don't have time or just don't have space for letting poor quality go through, especially when it comes to sort of products or features that you're launching. There is, I kind of see this on both sides, which is sometimes people are just off the opinion, put out an MVP, doesn't matter, just put things out there and let's hear feedback. And they've got other people that are like, I would describe as so precious about their product that they almost never launch, but they kind of work to so much detail and those sort of things that it's at the hindrance of a company. How do you, again, find that balance, and what is the right enough quality to put something out in market?
Yeah, well, it goes without saying there's no simple answer to that, but it is probably the number one thing that you need to get right in tech. And it's really, really, really hard. We cannot put flimsy, flaky MVPs out there in financial services. You're dealing with people's money, risk, fraud, trust, you're up against very established incumbents. So if you put anything flaky out there, it'll get cut apart straight away, and you should not be around. Like it's just as binary as that. So we absolutely take it very, very seriously. But I don't think that has to come at the sacrifice of everything else. Like if you talk about speed versus quality, and it's actually one interview question, like talking about which one would you choose if you have to choose one. It's a stupid question because you've got to take both. But which one would you take? It's very, very important because you need to move fast, but you need to get the detail right. You need to get the fundamentals right, but you also need to, it can't just be transactional, no pun intended. Like it has to be special. It has to be a magical moment. It has to get the aha of the customer when they use it. And they're like, if you don't get that, you'll scale a business slowly, but then they won't tell anyone about it. It won't be magical. It won't be special. They'll churn quicker. But if you can build something that's stable, something that's different, does the job, but then is a little bit magical or different, I think that's when you've got a winning company and you can really scale it. But yeah, unfortunately for the product design eng team, I'm a product person and I love getting to that. I do, the trusted team, they go and build it all, but I do look at pretty much every design after it's done, before it's released. I always do it. I do my own QA on it, whether that's before or just after, and I quickly pick up stuff because it's really hard with complicated products. But no, I'm unashamedly in the weeds of this and not sitting over their shoulder saying, do this, do that. But like, you go away, you know what we have to do. You're talented people, but bring it back. But don't be afraid of feedback. Like if you can't take feedback, you'll never work at a successful company. And it's the number one thing. I have to take it every day. Everyone has to take it. And we say this to every team now and again, just to say, remind people, are you okay with feedback? Because it's not a personal thing. It's not saying your work's crap. It's not saying you're not working out. It's like, it's just feedback. And if you can get feedback and you're open to it, you are going to be the best version of your professional self. Like there's no doubt. You don't have to take everything on and embrace everything. But if you can absorb it, digest it, take what's important and move on, you are going to be way better than anyone else. So yeah, detail is critical. Design is critical. I love all that and I'm deeply involved.
Yeah, because I love that. That's something else that Josh mentioned as well, is before every sort of product or feature goes live, you make sure that it's, tested to the nth degree internally, which is, I think that balance that not a lot of people get is they kind of think that just spending time and the quality will come from time and build. And then once you kind of spent all of that time building, then of course, like it's ready to ship eventually in this kind of like big thing. But a lot of that is, it sounds like you've got an iterative approach to making sure that before something goes out to market, it's gone through several versions of that to make sure that it's been rigorously tested and you're getting the right type of feedback. As you said, not every feedback is going to be taken on or valuable, but I think collectively kind of being able to take that on versus people just sitting in silos and then just releasing stuff is a much better approach to doing that.
Yeah, for sure. And when I've been on the front line actually building products and designing them or have you can get too close to it. It's an easy thing and you get too obsessed with it and you might have gone on a tangent and didn't know you were going that far, or you might have missed the detail and you've lost the broader picture, or the simplicity of something has been lost in the complexity or the features you're trying to cram into there. So to have someone like me or someone else going, I know enough about what it should do, but I haven't interacted with this for a few weeks or months since I've seen design. That fresh eyes thing is very, very important. Yeah, I think if you can have people in your teams that can do that, and that's the role I play often, I think it's very, very valuable. You can really get that quick feedback and understand whether it's gone off track a bit. So
yeah. And again, I'll reference the old interview that we did last time. But again, one of the things that you mentioned about being very particular about taking Square Peg on as partners was, as you rightly pointed out, investors are the stakeholders that you can't kick out. Once they're on your cap table, they are on your cap table. You're in that sort of partnership for the life of that company, for better or worse. And so picking the right partners is really important. You also kind of spoke about the reason why you kind of went with them was because of essentially the relationship that you sort of built up over time and being able to have the people that you felt would be sort of in your corner when sort of things weren't going as right. I guess now, having gone through the last 4 years of this, how have you sort of lent on Square Peg and some of your other investors? Like, where have they been able to sort of lean in and support you and the company beyond just the capital?
There's probably a few things there. I think early on, Apex and Square Peg were literally the first two I spoke to. So, and I actually wanted to speak to, and I spoke to a few others, but they were in straight away, the first two. So then I was like, I've just got to speak to others. Like, you should never take the first two checks you're offered. Obviously, two of the best investors in Australia, if not the best. So very, very lucky and privileged to have those conversations and get them on board. And I think also, because I don't know any other way, I was very direct. And I was literally saying, and because all investors actually ask, what are you looking for in an investor? And, how can we help? And I'll some be a bit more forthright and say, this is how we will help you. And I was always very strong and continue to this day. It's like, no, this is what we want. And if I can be honest with you, maybe you don't want to invest in us, and that's okay. Like if you're a heavily involved investor that wants to be in the weeds with us, we're just not looking for that. We're just not. Like you're trusting us to build a business, which is amazing. I've brought together this incredible group of people to do it. We're showing a track record. If I have to call in an investor to work on a basic part of a product or something, that's not the company you want your money in. But when things go wrong, when the economy turns or the tech correction that happens, or heaven forbid something worse that will happen in the future, and things get hard, maybe the growth slows or we need help, or myriad of things can go wrong in a business, will they be there to help, and do they have the skills? That's very important. But I hope they trust us to do what they're investing in us to do and not doing it themselves. So upfront with that, which I think worked really well for us. We're now getting to stages which, at the start, we knew exactly what we wanted to do and knew exactly how to do it and get it done. We'd had to execute it But now we are going to a lot more greenfield stuff that we, as a unit and as a team, haven't done everything. So I suspect us to lean on a lot more on our investors moving forward, and leaning on their network and getting, connected to people who can help. And I'm looking forward to that. The other thing I'll say is that, during that heady days of investment that we all went through on both sides of the table, all the speed dating everyone talked about and how fast term sheets were thrown around, and how quickly, like our first investment was fast, but that was pre the whole COVID hype and the zero interest rate environment. So it was like back kind of normal environment. But the next two rounds were absolutely right in the thick of all that headiness and what have you. And everyone talked about how hard it was and difficult, nerve-wracking it was for investors. But for the company as well, that was one of the most stressful things ever, because we're both moving fast and we are literally speed dating. I'm like, within minutes, days, and a couple of weeks, I work out our cap table's tiny. Am I going to just make this decision on this investor, whether it's a person within a company or the company's approach to investment, and I'm going to get them on the cap table and it's going to just explode or go the wrong way? And like that's a big responsibility. So I felt the nervousness as well. It was a very stressful time doing those rounds. But when that tech correction did happen, I don't know what it's now, 2 years ago or something, when everything sort of tightened up and zero interest rates disappeared, that was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to see the true colors of these investors. Like, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. And, one person within one of the companies kind of got a bit panicky, and it's like, oh, we need these reports. Now I need them on a weekly basis. I need to sell this out. And I just sort of called their whole team onto a meeting and just sort of said, hey, like, is there an issue here? Like, we provide the most detailed reporting monthly and annually that you can imagine or that you can ever want for. You can see the health of the business. We're growing very fast. There's nothing to be worried about here. Is there a problem? If there's a problem, I will give you whatever information you want. But if you don't tie my team down with excessive reporting, otherwise it's not to anyone's benefit. And credit to that person and that company, they went 100% got it. Yep, you're right. We've done our analysis. You guys are fine and safe. We'll let you go. So, as in, we won't ask for this additional information. Yeah. And everyone else was like, no, we're backing you. There's no changing. We're going to do things differently. I need more. Like that. Everyone else. So I was very, very proud of these companies on our cap table. Headline, Spark, Apex, Square Peg, Edition, all of them amazing. So through luck or just good personal interaction, I'm very proud of our cap table. I think they're some of the best in the world.
Zeller is the OG startup accounting firm in Australia, catering to all stages of your business life. If you're busy running a business, you don't always have the time to do your own books and forecasts, and instead you can fully outsource your finance function so that you have the time and resources back to do what you do best, which is growing your business. They have a dedicated focus on founders, funds, and startups, and have an experienced team that can help you with everything from managing your tax to balancing your books to even helping with your exit strategy. I trust and use them with all of my businesses and can't recommend them highly enough. To find out more or to speak to Gareth and the team, head over to sender.com. All right, let's get back to this episode. Yeah. And, I guess not everyone gets to be in that privileged position where they get to pick, but nonetheless, it is still a very important decision. And I think oftentimes founders can be in the mindset of like, whoever will give me money, let's get them on the cap table, which again is understandable, but kind of creates a bunch of long-term issues. And I've seen this way too many times that it's just not a good outcome for anyone involved in that business on either side of the table. What were, especially as you kind of mentioned through that speed dating process where you're trying to sort of learn these things, especially when Zeller is growing at the rate that you're kind of growing at. I'm sure you had a myriad of different options and people and those sort of things. What were some of the things that were really important for you that you were looking for, and how did you test for them during these conversations to make sure that even though it was an accelerated process, that you were making the right decision with the people that you brought on board?
Yeah, some investors just thrust it on you. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is how we're going to run this operation. This is how, and it's like, whoa, hang on. How can that one philosophy apply to all your portfolio companies? Because you're right. Like we're all at different stages. Some portfolio companies are having good times now. Their struggles will come later or early, whatever. It's never a straight line path. So some people just thrust it on you. It's like, they might be saying exactly what I want to hear and go, wow, that's perfect. Awesome. Let's go. Or it might be like, whoa, that's not at all what we're looking for here. There's definitely two levels to it. It's that personal connection. But unfortunately, you got to realize with the investment companies, it's a long multi-year thing. And that person mightn't be around for 1 day, 1 year, let alone 7 or 10 years. So you have to try to unpick what the DNA of the culture of the business is as well, and get that connection with a person and an advocate, but also more broadly, it's definitely down to trust. Like it's just definitely down to, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. These are the challenges we're going to have. This is what I don't know. This is what I have to work out. And this is very upfront, and there's no guarantees in any of this stuff. Like very, very clear. And then the people that liked it obviously resonated with. Other ones got a little bit nervous. But probably the underlying thing, which you can't really, it's more of a gut feel. I hate the phrase gut feel, but a conversation between a company and an investor has to be equal. Like has to be equal. And I think if it's off, is if they're treating you like you're lucky to talk to me or whatever, or if you're going other way around and you're being, we're the best company ever, lucky to get on, that should not be a partnership. But sometimes when you have good conversations with great investors, there's this equal thing. And I've had it with amazing companies around the world who I just didn't feel like an equal to them. I felt like I was being told I was lucky to be in the meeting room. I was like, listen, even if your brand is good and your money is green, this is not going to work, because we have to be equals. Like we're going to work better if we're working at that level. So that's something I always look for. Is it a good, equal connection and it's going well? But back to your earlier point, I know how condescending I sound now, like saying, the best companies in the world, best cap table, and grow. I 100% get that, and I've been lucky, and so we've been lucky. We're in a very, very privileged position, and we don't take that for granted at all, which just comes back to another big part of our companies, that we treat our spend very carefully. We're very prudent. We're very careful. We don't get carried away. Like, 2 of us in the co-founding team didn't pay ourselves for 2 years. We're still, commonly across the pay scales, not the highest paid people in the company. And so we trade it very seriously. We walk the walk. And if investors sort of like that side of it, they know that their money, we're not going to waste it, and we're going to treat it carefully, and we know what to do with it. Yeah.
And one thing that you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier was you've started to spend, you've gotten back into spending more time on the hiring side of things.
Yep.
I imagine that there are a lot of demands for your time across both internally and externally with things. How do you think about like structuring your time to be impactful? Like what does your day-to-day or like schedule normally look like?
Yeah, I don't think there's any day-to-day. Like I think I've been able to, back to that theory of not having one-on-ones with the 8 direct reports I have, if not more, and just having those all in, share all information at once, whilst it's a very intense meetings that we have 2 to 3 times a week. It saves me an inordinate amount of time in one-on-ones, and it also saves everyone else all the time. So the whole business gets a heap of time back to focus on their teams or the work they're doing. So I think they're incredibly valuable. They can feel full on sometimes because you're covering the deepest topics. You're listening to everyone's issues or success or whatever. I think that immensely helps. I don't have to repeat myself to different teams. And so I was just speaking to Josh, for example, and then now Dom, what about this? It's like he's heard that conversation. So we've kind of this cross-learning is really, really helpful. In terms of how I spread my time, it's probably polars. It's probably like, obviously as a CEO, you're responsible for making the big calls, the strategic direction, making sure we're doing the right thing there, whether it's cap raising, whether it's growth, whether it's product or new markets, et cetera, or big issues. But then on the other side, I'm looking at, why are those buttons not rounded when we said we're moving towards round button, like that minutia side. So I don't know if that's right, but that's the way I sort of do it. The middle part of my role is dispersed to everyone else and make sure I got a very, very talented team, and they've got talented teams and they can do the majority of that. I don't have to get involved with that middle bit, and it works really well for us at the moment.
What was that always a policy for you to not have direct sort of one-on-ones with your report, or was that something evolved over time?
No, always. I used to do them at Square, and then the penny dropped for me. It's like, this is crazy. Like I'm spending so much time in one-on-ones, and then I looked in the other meeting rooms and everyone else was in one-on-ones with each other. And it's like, we got to do work here. Like we're like, as much as information sharing is important, these one-on-ones are not an efficient way of doing it. And I know, again, many people will say one-on-ones are the most important parts of their management philosophy. I find them frustratingly inefficient way to communicate in a business. Like just share all information. The learnings I get with conversations between product and engineering or in design and growth, like that, they're invaluable, and I wouldn't have heard them and they wouldn't have heard mine. And so there's no other way to do it than that. So no, early on, always the same way, always the same. No one-on-ones. So, and often when new senior people come in, they're kind of like, right, I'm gonna set up one-on-ones. I'm like, you might need to trust me on one thing here. Let's try it without that and see how you go, and come back to me if you need them. Some people still sort of do them now and again, and I'm not going to pull people up to exactly like the way I run it, but I do question people and say, is that efficient? You can't scale that. So
yeah. And what do those meetings with your senior management look like? Like what's the structure of them?
Yeah, this sounds a bit naff, but we don't start meetings without having a few jokes and a few conversations. So we talk about what we did and on the weekend or what we're going to do. And it's sometimes it's like when we've had life's ups and downs, right? So sometimes it's a little bit like, oh God. As in when I ask the question, people might do that. And then before you know it, you're having a laugh, and all the stress from, that day before or the night before or some issue that's happening just melts away, and you're back to being people and just having a laugh, and you inherently start really getting to know these people closely. Like, and we know everything's happening in our respective lives. And I think if you don't force that a little bit, you'll end up having like close relationships with some and not with others. But we kind of really make sure before every meeting we have a good laugh or a good conversation about something and tease each other a little bit, and then we hook into it. And I've got a strong philosophy on 2 gears. Like, I think as a human, you're going to muck around, you're going to be silly now and again, you're going to joke. We all want to do that. Life's too serious, too quick to be serious all the time. So, but once we click into work mode, it's game. Like the laughing we did 5 seconds ago, we're on. Okay, let's really get into this, and we can get into strong debates and stuff, and keep pushing that. And I think that works really well. But those meetings are absolute detail. We do call them now and again. So, right, I hate this phrase, but let's take that offline. This is going too deep now. But if we can solve in that room, it saves another follow-up meeting and another follow-up session. So, yeah, we go very deep, very specific. It's just, I find it a very, very efficient way of doing it. And it's working well. So,
yeah, very cool. And one thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier that I think is going to really stick with me is you kind of mentioned that, when you're scaling a company at the speed and at the size that you are, you have to keep evolving over time. Like, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. Again, reminds me of what we kind of spoke about at the last interview about you kind of talking about the horizon theory around sort of looking ahead and sort of projecting around what are the things coming up. How do you sort of think about that from a business perspective? And like, when is the right time to, focus on like what's next versus just focusing on the execution of the thing that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, there's, again, no simple answer to this one, but it should always feel too soon, I think. I think it should be like, oh, we don't need to. Like, we're going really well here. If I think in my head, if that's happening, it means you're kind of out of the cut and the thrust of the first build part, and you're really focused on getting that first thing done. It means you've got enough space in your mind to think about the other things, but not too late. So yeah, I think there's no like line that you see, oh, now we do it. But yeah, it should feel, and it should be a bit of rigorous debate. People going, you sure we want to do this? And it should feel a little bit like, wow, that's too early. And time will tell whether it's the right call. But if you get started on that, then you can start chipping away. If you have to rush it, you'll make stupid decisions. Like if you run out of growth, then quickly we need a big bold bet that generates more revenue or bigger TAM or whatever, and you have to force that, you'll inherently make a worse decision than when you're doing it earlier and you've got that time to really sort of tease it out a bit and just get going on it and get it. So I think that's what we've done. Like we got a lot of bold bets in the mix now, and we're pushing towards that next horizon of the business. But yeah, back to that. That was the first time I ever talked about that, and I never have any of my theories or comments having catchphrases. But the horizon theory actually, it stuck with me when it obviously came through an organic conversation. But it is very true. Like you can't see beyond the next horizon what you're going to do, what the team's going to be, what the challenges are going to be. So just move in the direction, and it unfolds in front of you. And so I think that's great for anyone's career, and it's great for our company because whilst we look back and go, well, how good is it that we've scaled to this point? And much I believed it, it's hard to know that you're going to get there. So if you just keep pushing in the right direction, it's great. And now we're looking at new markets, we're looking at new products, new scaling opportunities, and that regenerates a whole excitement through the company as well, which is beneficial.
Is there anything that helps you kind of shift gears and retain that perspective? Because as you mentioned, you've got the sort of two modes where you're kind of in the weeds of, is that button round enough, to sort of thinking through like international expansion, whatever it may be, like expansion opportunities for the business, and figuring out when is the right time to kind of focus on both and how to do that, and then filter that out through the rest of the company. Is there anything that kind of helps you? Is there frameworks that you use or people that you use around you to help you navigate and manage that?
No, I don't. I do listen to a lot of podcasts in our space, and I do see interviews and read stuff about it, and I like absorbing that, but I make up a number. 90% of the things I hear I don't agree with, but it challenges my thinking. So no, I don't have any structured frameworks to that. I was a management consultant for too long, and I did way too many structured framework decision making, and I realized it's a waste of time. It's just a way to generate time and revenue. No, it's just about just moving forward, pushing ahead, pulling out bureaucracy, pulling out process, keep going. The shifting gears thing's natural for me. I think as humans, I think we don't like doing the same thing anyway. So the fact that if my world, if I can shift gears from the minutia to the macro, I'm happy. I'm happy. If I was just focused on one, I'd get bored. So that's an organic shift for me. But they'll also go hand in hand. Getting the detail right will lead you to the bigger solution. So. Yeah.
And one thing that you mentioned earlier in this interview is there is no finish line insight when you're building the space. And, a lot of this requires having to keep going back to the well and having that, like you said, some people just find that really difficult. Some people just really gravitate towards that. From your perspective, like what keeps you going? What's your mission objective with Zeller?
I probably haven't thought that enough through. I know everyone talks about they have their own thing. I probably don't have mine. I don't. I think I just, again, back to the same thing I say way too much, is I like just doing difficult stuff. If I'm going to work in a company or somewhere or do something, I want to be challenged all the time. I want to be stretched. I want to feel like I need to evolve. I need to do different things, and that's probably innate to most humans. But that's where I love being. Absolutely love being. And yeah, I think for me, if I didn't have that, I just would get bored and I'd instantly want out. And I think that's why other people change companies, is they don't quite get that constant mix. And the beautiful thing about high growth startup, you get everything thrown at you, good, bad, small, big, all the time. And constantly doing that. And I think if you can't withstand that, it's not the right environment. But I love it. That's literally why I like working in this industry that we all work in. So
yeah, love it. And maybe final question along the similar lines, like you kind of mentioned that really believe in work-life balance, but you just believe in like your own version of balance, which I think is completely what I believe in as well. I think it isn't a 50-50 split, or like everyone has to have the same thing. It's your own version of that. How do you, and you kind of mentioned that, your friends, family, kids are really important for you. How do you again, sort of think about your own management or structure of all of those sort of things to just make sure that you're not dropping any buckets while you're kind of, focusing on, have this intense passion and focus on the business? How do you find your own version of balance for yourself with other areas of your life?
I think the answer's in the question that you asked, where it's such a personal thing. It's such a personal thing. And I hate when people say, don't let work define you, and you work too hard and that's not healthy for you. A lot of human beings, it's the greatest joy they get. And whether you're an artist and you're painting something and that's work, or whether you're building a tech company and that's work, the best people you come across, they actually love what they do. And when I hear other people talk about, well, no, you work too hard or you haven't got work-life balance, it's like, the risk of being philosophical, you run your own lives. Like we only get one of them, religion aside, use it the way you want to do it. Don't feel threatened by someone else who says you shouldn't be running it that way. You should get more balance. Like if you want to work 20 hours in a day, then you do that. Like if that's what you want. Yes, don't burn out. Life's short. Don't get unhealthy, but just do what you want to do. And I think ultimately you'll know. Now, I don't want people working that hard at all. That's definitely not a healthy thing at all. But I just believe in making sure, again, back to create an environment which is fairly consistent. Come and join in. This is the way we work. We work hard, but we enjoy taking time off. We enjoy friends and family. I probably haven't always got that balance right, and over time I've kind of learnt where I sit on it. Helps when kids become more independent, and so but they're on the journey with us as well, so that's an important part. But I think recently, probably the last few years, we've got a pretty good balance. And yeah, you have to work hard and you have to work after hours, and there's no single day which I'm technically off at all, and that's okay. I don't. That's what I signed up to, and I think anyone in tech, that's the deal. Like if you don't like it, there's plenty more other paths you can take, and that's perfectly fine too. Yeah,
amazing, Ben. I can talk to you for hours, but thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your updated journey with Zeller. For anyone that wants to find out more, say hello, get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, if it's about the product or the business, myzeller.com, any Australian business, no matter what you're doing, we're providing some pretty amazing services which you can come and try our different products. And I welcome you, no matter what type of business you are, check us out, sign up, see what works for you. I'm on all the usual channels, obviously LinkedIn, socials, etc. So feel free to reach out at any time. And we're always growing and scaling. So if you're a talented person that likes a little % of what I said and our culture might resonate with you, just check us out and we might have a job for you as well. So
yeah, perfect. I will make sure all of those links in the show notes. Ben, once again, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cool.
Thanks for listening to episode 203 of the Startup Playbook podcast. As always, full show notes from this episode will be available at startupplaybook.co. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime, if you enjoyed this interview, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.